Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today is a continuation of my NBA season preview series, and this one is for the Atlanta Hawks. And it makes sense that I'm doing them today, right after I just released yesterday the Dallas Mavericks season preview, simply because those two franchises are going to be connected for at least the next 15 years because of the Luka Doncic Trae Young trade that landed both of those franchises young cornerstone pieces for them moving forward. Now, it's pretty tough to argue that these two teams are in different places as franchises. The Mavs have two really good young cornerstone players in Luka and Kristaps Porzingis and could potentially push for a playoff spot this season in the tough Western Conference, while the Hawks are still a little bit further away from being legit playoff contenders, at least in my opinion, and we kind of have to wait and see where they are, and this season should give us a good indication of that. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself going into expectations and predictions and things like that. Let's just take a look and see what they did last year and then move forward into their season preview. So last season, the Hawks finished with a 29-53 record, which is actually a 5-win improvement over last season under first-year head coach Lloyd Pierce, even though they got off to an awful 5-18 start, but then they actually were able to bring it back a little bit and had some strong points at the end of the season to bring their record up to 29 wins. Now, in terms of their offseason, there is a lot to talk about here. First up, in terms of additions, is their highest draft pick, DeAndre Hunter, someone that, in my opinion, doesn't have a super high ceiling, but he also has a pretty high floor. He's someone that is going to be a good complementary option around Trae Young and John Collins and some of the other guys that they have on this roster pretty immediately. He's going to be a very good defender. I'm questioning his shooting stats a little bit just because there isn't a ton of volume to suggest him being a really good shooter immediately at the NBA level and during his time in Virginia. Obviously, his percentage is very good, but volume is a little bit questionable. I think eventually he'll get there, but I'm not anticipating him being like a 38% three-point shooter straight away for the Hawks. But I do think he's going to be good and eventually could develop into one of the best complementary players across the NBA as a 3-and-D two-way complementary option. Next up in terms of additions is pretty much the complete opposite of DeAndre Hunter as a draft pick, and that is Cam Reddish. He's someone that has an extremely high ceiling, could potentially be an all-star while on his rookie contract, or could also be a complete bust. He's someone that just kind of has to figure out how to fit into a team. He certainly has the talent to be a really good offensive option and is a really good defender as well, has great size, is a great athlete, which I think gets overshadowed a little bit by his inefficient offensive game in college. He's a really good defender, but he has to figure out ways to score within the team concept and not just take things over and try and score on his own, specifically on inefficient shots such as the mid-range. If he can figure out a way to be a really good off-ball shooter, attack the rim, and just do good things within the flow of the offense, I think Cam Reddish is going to be a really good player and then develop into maybe a top 2 scoring option on a particular team and potentially an all-star after that. However, there are obviously concerns. Like I said, he has the tendency to kind of want to take things over, not really share the ball too much, and just isn't that efficient of a scorer or a shooter. But in terms of a guy that you're picking at the 10th pick for this Hawks team, this made a lot of sense, and I do like the move. Whether he works out or not, I think in theory, it makes sense. Next up in terms of additions are 3 basically just salary dump guys, and Evan Turner, Allen Crabbe, and Chandler Parsons. They all came in various trades and things like that, but they're really not significant. They're basically just there to have their contracts expire or be moved in a later trade. They do provide a little bit of value. Evan Turner is a playmaker, Allen Crabbe is a shooter, and then Chandler Parsons is also there as well. But again, that's not really what they're there for. They're just salary dumps, essentially. They got things in return or moved some other contracts. So not really huge additions here. And last up now in terms of additions is a really interesting one, and that is Jabari Parker, who is still only 24 years old, by the way, and is someone that can still carve out a good role for himself in the NBA. The problem is he has to realize that that is not going to be as a number 1 scoring option. He has the size and the skill to certainly help a team, but he has to learn how to fit in and use his skill set in the proper way rather than trying to go back to his days as a potential number 1 option like he was before all the knee injury issues that he's had. Now, even though his days as a number 1 option are over, he can still certainly score the ball really well for a team, attacking off of closeouts, shooting off the ball, things like that. He could be a really good 6th man potentially in the right situation moving forward throughout his career, but it's also possible that he continues to struggle with fit and with injury issues, and all this is just what it is, a flyer, and then he's looking for the exact same thing next offseason, but still an interesting addition. Moving on now to subtractions. The first one is Dwayne Dedmon, who got a pretty hefty contract to go to Sacramento, and that's for good reason. He's a really good, versatile big, and is going to be a pretty big loss for this Hawks team, specifically the 5 spot, which is going to be an issue for them, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Really good versatility on both ends, so this is actually a pretty significant loss for them. Next up in terms of subtractions is Kent Bazemore, who's someone that they traded for Evan Turner. That's kind of a wash. There's really not a whole lot to talk about there. And then as you continue down the list, another subtraction is Taurean Prince, which is a player that they kind of wanted to move all last season anyway because he's good, but he's also about to need a new contract and they don't really want to pay him. He doesn't quite fit the timeline exactly of what they wanted to do. So although his minutes on the wing as a scorer and as a defender are going to be missed, they have DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish now to fill those. Second to last now in the subtractions category is big man Amari Spellman, who they moved to Golden State in exchange for Damian Jones and a second-round pick. He just never quite figured it out, and for some reason they felt the need to cut bait on him sooner rather than later, despite being drafted as a first-round pick, like I said, just last year. And then other than that, in terms of depth that they lost, they did lose Miles Plumlee, takes away some of their depth at the 5 spot, but really not that significant of a subtraction to talk about. But again, just like in all these videos, I feel like I got to mention him because there's always that one person that mentions that I didn't say anything about him in the comment section. Moving on now, let's talk about the Hawks depth chart for this upcoming season, and it's a little bit in flux. Like, you know, you've got your core 4, at least in my opinion, of players in Young, Huerter, probably Hunter, and then John Collins. And then who that 5th guy is really just depends. If you want to play John Collins at the 5 spot, you can. You can put in someone like Cam Reddish or any number of other wings. You can certainly go small that way. You can put it a more traditional 5 like someone like Alex Len or Damian Jones. A lot of different options here, but I think that core 4 is probably going to be together and start for most of the season when healthy, assuming that Hunter assimilates well to the NBA game, which I certainly think he will, just because of how good of a defender he is, even if he does struggle with his shots at times. If you want to take Hunter off of that and you just want to say this is their core 3, that you can fill out everybody else around that, I think that's fair. But again, it just kind of depends. A lot of this stuff does lineup wise on matchups and just how things are going throughout the season. In terms of their bench, they do have some good options like potentially Cam Reddish or potentially Jabari Parker, Damian Jones, or Alex Len, any of the guys you can see that might not go into that starting spot that I talked about, are starting 2 spots. They do have good depth up and down the roster, guys that can do different things for them. They're a little bit suspect at the 5 spot, assuming that John Collins isn't going to be that guy, which I certainly have questions about him being able to be a full-time 5 just because he doesn't have great size. So depth there or just overall talent at that position could be an issue, but maybe that's why they traded for Damian Jones and traded away Amari Spellman, was because they wanted a more traditional 5 instead of him. I'm not sure, but that could certainly be an issue for them. Moving on now to a player to watch, and I'm going to throw out Kevin Huerter, and obviously you guys are going to be watching him, but more so from a negative perspective, and that's just, I need to see more from him. Like, I get the excitement, and he was really good as a rookie. Maybe people didn't expect him to be as good as he was, but I do think that he has some competition for the backcourt of the future title there in Atlanta. Like, Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter are extremely talented, and even though they're not as traditional backcourt players as someone like Huerter, they provide more on the defensive end. They are better two-way contributors at this point, or at least defensive contributors at this point. And I need to see more tangible stuff from him in his second season. I'm not taking anything away from his rookie year, but I just kind of want to see it all come together for him on both ends of the floor. Improvement as a defender, improvement as a playmaker, continued shooting prowess from him to really convince me that he is the right guy to be alongside Trae Young for the foreseeable future. People love to compare this team and Golden State and say that this is like the next Golden State, which I'm not saying that anybody think that's true. I think that there's just a lot of parallels there in terms of the guys that they've drafted. So if people really think that Kevin Huerter is going to be the Klay Thompson to Trae Young's Steph Curry, I need to see more from him this season. So that is why he is a player to watch for me. And then the other one is kind of an obscure one, but I like to throw these in there at every single season preview, just a guy that you want to watch out for that not everybody is talking about. And this one is DeAndre Membry. He played in every single game for the Hawks last year, over 23 minutes a game, and provides a lot of good things for this team. He's got a really interesting mix in of playmaking in his game, despite the fact that he's more of a wing player, good defender, plays extremely hard. But again, just like Dorian Finney-Smith last video, he just doesn't shoot the ball very well, and that continues to hold him back, especially if he's going to be an off-ball player. Now, you can use him as like a second unit playmaker and put shooters around him so he's not playing off-ball, but when you've got guys like Huerter and potentially Reddish and Young to initiate offense, you don't really need a ton of those super specialized playmaker guys that need the ball in their hands coming off the bench. So if he can improve as a three-point shooter, keep up that playmaking stuff, be a good defender, I think he could be really valuable for this team, potentially be an extension candidate to continue to come back, despite the fact that he's not really a young guy that we talk about a ton. But again, just keep an eye on DeAndre Membry. I really like his game, and I think he could be someone significant for this team. Moving on now to expectations for this Hawks team. I'm not on the Atlanta Hawks as a legit playoff contender bandwagon right now. And I talked about this a little bit in a couple of different videos. I think it was the Bulls one that I talked about it most recently. I don't really buy into the whole, oh, the Eastern Conference is weak at the back end and just putting in all of these young teams that's potentially stealing the 8th spot in the East. Like I said, the Bulls are a common one. I think they're actually more likely to make the playoffs than the Hawks are, to be completely honest with you. But as you look at the standings from last year, I don't want to reiterate too much of what I said in that Bulls video. Basically, the East is better than you think it is. There's like 6 teams that are guaranteed to make the playoffs, and then some of them that aren't are like Orlando and Detroit, potentially Toronto. Like those teams, the Heat with Jimmy Butler didn't make the playoffs last year. It's going to be tougher to get the 8th spot than you think. So I don't think it's a realistic expectation for this team to make the playoffs. I think they're certainly talented, but they are at least 1 year and probably one player away, in my opinion. In terms of my own prediction, I kind of spoiled it for you. I don't think that the Hawks are going to make the playoffs. I'm putting them in like the 31 to 34, 35 win range. I think they're going to make another about 5-win improvement this season, just like they did last year. But I'm just not convinced that they're going to be all the way there. They're going to have issues defending. Obviously, they do play in the Eastern Conference, so they're going to have an easier time getting wins than they would if they played in the West. But that doesn't just automatically guarantee every single young team in the East the 8th seed. And I think you can kind of tell that this is a pet peeve for me, or is becoming one. But like I said, they have the talent, they have the scoring, they have the skill. Defending is going to be an issue, and rim protection, specifically at the 5 spot, is going to be an issue as well. I like John Collins. Everybody likes John Collins, but I'm not just going to come out and say that he is going to be this great 5-man for this team. Probably more realistically a 4, and I don't really like their options at the 5. I do like the fact that they have so many different lineup combinations now that they drafted these 2 new wings in Reddish and Huerter. I like Young. I'm still kind of on the fence with Huerter in terms of being like the legit long-term backcourt partner for Trae Young, but he's still a good player. They have all that stuff. I like Bembry. Like, they have good players and they have good combinations they could put on the floor. I'm just not all in on the whole playoff expectations, predictions thing. So again, between 31 to 34, 35 wins for me personally for the Atlanta Hawks and not making the playoffs. But that is going to be the end of today's NBA season preview, this one for the Atlanta Hawks. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, specifically season preview videos, be sure to check those out. I'm going to be covering every single team across the NBA over the next 7 or so weeks leading up to the start of the NBA season. I promise you I'm going to get to every single one. So if I haven't talked about your team yet, I promise I'm going to get there. I'm going to follow through, do all 30 teams. But once again, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Tucker. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I will see you all next time.